not responding. I need to record it and I need to go live in the group. Did it put me on the Wi-Fi? Yep. Always kicking me off the Wi-Fi. Ha. Finally, success. Hello, wonderful patient ladies. Thank you for your patience tonight. As I'm dealing with a little Wi-Fi lag here. I think it's all okay. We're back. You're back on the good Wi-Fi. I think all is well. Just trying to close some windows so this thing will work a little bit better. Bear with me. While I'm fixing technical stuff, drop into the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and tell us how your week's going. And if you have any training questions that you have not yet dropped in the group, feel free to post them in the chat. We got some awesome questions that will guide our discussion tonight, all about training, but feel free to pipe in as I'm working on getting this thing up on Facebook. I think the tech gods are smiling on us now. All right, let's see. Are we live? We are live in Facebook. Yay. Okay. Rocking and rolling now. Now we can settle into the fun stuff. All right, I'm going to do a quick rundown of the questions that will definitely be getting the most airtime tonight. So you can use this as a little table of contents, if you will, for tonight's chat. Welcome to those who are not familiar with me. It's Natalie, the Keto Bikini Pro. And tonight we are going live, talking all about training. I'm finding that these live Q&As are amazing, and we get to touch on so much more than our deep dives. So once or twice a month, I've decided to do these live Q&As where you can ask me anything. Tonight's Ask Me Anything is all training related. So anything related to strength building, muscle building, training specific questions, and I got some bangers. So here's the top question asked that I will be covering tonight. Big, awesome first question, all about core training. How to target or strengthen the core when you have lower back pain or back injuries. That's going to be a fun one, awesome one. I think that will benefit everybody, even if you don't have back injuries. Most women I hear lower back pain, lower back pain. So we'll definitely talk about that. I was specifically asked what I think about planks. That will be a part of that discussion for sure. Rest days, and specifically rest days versus active recovery or active rest. What is the difference? What can you do on a rest day? How many rest days do I recommend in a week? And then we have some programming questions. We have questions about equipment, how to create a well-structured training routine at home with minimal equipment. And without access to a gym, what equipment do I recommend beyond, of course, our dumbbells? Intensity. How do you know you're getting the right intensity in your training? Progressive overload, one of my favorite topics I've talked about before on a masterclass. But beyond increasing sets and increasing reps and increasing weight, what are some other ways to progressively overload? Which, if you've heard me talk about that before, you know progressive overload is how you get the gains. So we're going to talk about all the ways you can do that beyond the basics. Proper warm-up and stretching to prevent injury for various sports. Hormones and training. Are there optimal times during our female cycle for lifting, cardio, resistance training, and resting? That one I may actually build on because I'm going down rabbit holes right now in my research on female hormones, training, diets, fasting, all the things during your cycling years and perimenopause and postmenopause and the whole menopausal transition. So I'm geeking out on that. I will continue geeking out on that probably for a couple of months to come, but just know that this has sparked. And I've been so interested in this lately that I will probably do a very deep dive masterclass on hormones in the future. But we'll touch on it tonight. Protein powder for training, timing and amounts. And that was in regards to optimal amino acids post-workout. And I'm pretty sure gains well. And then we had some body composition goals related to training. How do I build muscle on keto? One of my favorite questions. How do you eat in a surplus while in keto? Do you increase fat? Do you increase protein? Do you cycle carbs? If y'all have been around for the most recent master classes, you've heard me talk about those things. I will touch on it again tonight and then reference those master classes for more information there. And then we had some questions about cardio for fat loss or cardio in general. Should you be doing cardio for fat loss? How intense does it need to be? How long in duration are we talking? And then there were some more specific questions about cardio, which is prompting me to do our next class on cardio. So next Monday's masterclass will be entirely about cardio. So cardio questions will be at the end of this masterclass. I will touch on them here, and then we'll dive deeper next week. All right, so now that you've heard all the questions, if there's a question you have that was not in that list, type it in the chat. If you're following along on Facebook Live there, feel free to type it in the chat or in the comments on Facebook. Make sure that I have the comments open on Facebook. Or at any point in time, feel free to unmute yourself and speak up if you have a question on anything that I'm sharing or a comment. Okay, now I see us on Facebook. Good times. Okay, cool. Let me get my notes up here. Oh, good question, Maria. What does maintenance look like? Is that a thing for some? Of course it's a thing. And I actually did a maintenance masterclass. So I went deep on that topic. I'm going to write that down here as well so I don't miss that later when I get to all the body count questions. What does maintenance look like? Cool. But yes, definitely search the group. And this is just a little housekeeping for everyone. Typically after I do a masterclass, I post the replay and then I will post that I posted the replay to let y'all know that the replay has been posted. It's usually going to be one of the first posts you'll see when you come to a group or into the group right after a masterclass that same week. Usually it goes up the next day. So on Tuesdays, they should be posted. If you're not finding one, you can always use the search inside the group. That's searches just like Google, just like any other search engine. You can search for any topic. And if we did a masterclass on it before, it'll pop up. All the masterclass replays are saved in the past events tab and also in guides. So but if you want to search for any topic you're thinking about, just search inside the group, use the little search function, and it'll pull up wherever those replays are posted. And anytime you can't find one, just tag me in the group and ask me to tag you where the replay lives, and I'll tag you there so you can find it. We have a whole year of weekly masterclasses and question and answers now archived all in the group. So there are lots of topics that have been covered. However, I'm never hesitant to cover a topic again. So if you have a topic of interest, even if we did it before, always ask in the group if I can go over it, and I'll be happy to add it to the list. All right, with that being said, let's dive into the Q&A. Okay, let's start with this core strength question. This question was from one of our ladies who has to deal with osteoarthritis in her lower back, bulging discs and slip discs. So for those of you who fall into any of those categories or more back injury categories, this is for you. But also, this is also for you if you struggle at all with any back pain. And this even includes, you just get back pain around your cycle or something like that. It doesn't have to be a chronic thing, but if you struggle with back pain, if you experience back pain when you're trying to do ab workouts or core strengthening workouts, this is for you. And anybody who just thinks they have a weak core, most of us do, unless we have spent dedicated time working on it, this is for you. Okay, she shares, normal exercises are very painful, if not impossible, especially laying on her back, or overstretching. How would I go about targeting my core? Okay, so first and foremost, this is because your core is very weak. So the core, many people don't know, but the core is much more than just abs. And it's much, much more than the abs you can see or that you want to see. We have the transverse abdominis, we have the rectus abdominis. The key for developing core strength are going to be those inner ab muscles that you're not seeing. And our core wraps all the way around to the back. So that lumbar back region as well is also part of the core. So we want to strengthen all of that. And the more you strengthen it, the less pain you will feel. And this feels very counterintuitive when you're dealing with pain, to say, normally we don't tell you to train through pain. But in this case, you're going to need to strengthen that area. And the only way you're going to reduce your pain is strengthening that area. So there is a misconception sometimes that we can't do anything when we have pain, or that we have to avoid movement when we have pain. But the truth is that exercising may not be able to heal a bulging disc, for example, but it can strengthen your back, increase your spinal stability, and help decrease the stress on that disc. So generally speaking, as long as they're performed correctly, core and back exercises are beneficial for things like bulging discs and other back injuries. Also, low impact activities, depending on the person, walking, elliptical, swimming, stationary bike are examples of low impact activities. That could also be good for strengthening that area. I highly recommend that anybody who has back injuries work with a physiotherapist or a physical therapist and get specific rehab exercises for your injuries from a medical professional, or their medical guidance on any exercises you need to avoid for that injury. But in general, some exercises to avoid with these kinds of back injuries would be anything that puts pressure on the affected joints or overexerts your abdominal muscles. So when you talk about that overstretching, that's what we're talking about. A lot of the time when we want to build that six pack, we're doing these hyperextensive movements because we want to get as much range of motion in that abdominal area as possible. These are not going to be the things that you want to do with bulging discs. This includes high impact cardio, like interval training, HIIT style cardio, that will aggravate it. Flexion based movements, what I was just talking about, that hyperextension, leg lifts, hanging leg raises, things of that nature, sit-ups, twisting movements like your Russian twists. These are things we want to avoid with those kind of injuries. And then high level, like advanced core strength exercises, obviously. And then repetitive forward bending at the waist. So what are some generally recognized as safe activities that you can do with back injuries to strengthen your core? Number one, the next question I got about core exercises was somebody who's in a 28-day plank challenge. What do you think about planks? I love planks. Planks would probably be my number one ab core strengthening activity exercise. And there are many different planks out there. There are lots and lots and lots of variations you can do on planks. Everything from just a tabletop, all fours position, to a full plank, arms outstretched, to an elbow plank, to planks with one leg raised, the other leg raised, one arm raised, the other arm raised, opposite arm and leg. There's lots and lots of variations you can do on planks. So, but stabilizing movements like that are going to be your best friend when we're talking about developing core strength and stability beyond the aesthetic kind of things. Working up to planks, and these are all things that do require this next group do require laying on your back on the floor, which this poster mentioned is difficult for her. But these are like the first exercises I will give to anyone who struggles with a weak core. So simple things, you're going to lay on your back, floor march. It's just it's marching like you would be on the floor, standing, but this will be on you're laying on your back and you're just lifting one leg, not straight legged. You're going to be bent leg and just putting it back on the floor like a march. Similar movement, leg drop, sometimes called a leg drop, or active leg lowering to the floor or to a bolster. So you could put like a foam roller or something under your ankle and lower your leg to it. So this is all, especially for that lower abdominal region, that lower core, strengthening, tightening that lower core. Even more basic, first thing I would work on for everyone is working on your pelvic tilt. And this is where a lot of people get their core activation wrong. And what's causing a lot of the pain is not flattening your back and not understanding the difference between being um, in the position of your pelvis. So being in a posterior or an anterior pelvic tilt. And if you look up the pelvic tilt, look up any of these things I've mentioned on YouTube, you'll find tutorials on how to do it. I love to watch tutorials from physical therapists as opposed to necessarily trainers. Of course, there are trainers I trust more than others, so I will go to certain resources, and I am building out a resource library for you all to go to where I would say, okay, these are people that I trust. So if you go there, you have Natalie's cosign on the information you're going to find there. So I'm working on that for you. But in the meantime, you can search these, any of these exercises, and I would look for a physical therapist that you can follow, because they typically are going to have more rehab in mind. So pelvic tilt, and then that goes into the next step. There would be bridges. So like glute bridges, bridges from the floor, where you're lifting your glutes, creating that tabletop position or that flat angled position from your shoulders all the way up to your knees. And it's all about that pelvic tilt. When we have an arch in our back, that is not going to create any stability for any exercise that you do. And all of these core, and part of why I'm starting with the core question is because this is going to be absolutely foundational to everything else you do. I don't want you picking up a weight until you've established core stability. And most trainers, when you go in to work with a personal trainer in person, the first thing they're going to have you do are a lot of these movements to see how your alignment and see how your core strength stacks up. And then they will likely have you doing these exercises without any weights until you develop that stability, and they will not put weights in your hand. A good trainer won't. I am grateful for the very first trainer that made me do all of this early on before I ever started lifting, because you will create movement imbalances, muscle imbalances, and things that will create injuries later on that will be a lot more difficult to correct later on. So another favorite, pelvic tilts, bridges, plank variations, dead bugs. And you can do this with a stability ball or just with your own body weight. But basically, dead bug, it's like you're laying on the ground like a dead bug. You get your arms up, you get your knees up at 90 degrees. And then alternating, you're going to take one arm back and the opposite leg forward. And what you don't want your back coming off the ground. You don't want that arch happening in your back. It's all of these things I've said so far. Sometimes we just say, oh, that's too easy for me. It doesn't feel like a challenge. You're probably not doing it right. Because if you're doing it right, you will feel that engagement in your lower core. So dead bugs are the absolute one of the first things I would do, along with, I mentioned the floor march or the leg drop. And then if you take that and flip it over, we have bird dog. So now you're on all fours, and just like the dead bug, but now instead of being on your back, you're on all fours and you're lifting one arm up while stretching the other leg back. Same thing, you're trying not to change the position of your pelvis, not to let your back arch. So you're holding that stability. So all of these are core stability movements. Did I miss anything? Yep, that's all that's my jam there. So yeah, all of the crunches and the sit-ups and all the fancy, the ones that get all the popularity over the years, those can cause more problems than good if you're just jumping in there. Matter of fact, you could do a badass core and ab workout with just these exercises I mentioned, and this will be more beneficial to you in the long run than all that other stuff. Yay, I got the thumbs up, so I know I answered that question. All right, cool. New on Facebook. Okay. All right, let's get into rest days. How many rest days are recommended in a week? This is one of those how long is a piece of string questions. Don't you just love it when coaches and trainers say it depends? But this is definitely, there's going to be a few of these, but this is definitely an it depends situation. There is no one size fits all. It depends on many factors related to your ability to recover. So your recovery capacity. This is not only different from person to person, but you can be in a different place with your ability to recover today than you will be 3 months from now, or you might have been 3 months ago. So this will change a lot in your own journey, and especially from person to person. So here's some thoughts for when I'm programming for clients. I take the following factors into consideration. Of course, we want to look at current goals. What are you working on, right? What are you trying to achieve? Fitness level and experience. Are you an experienced lifter? What have you done in the past? Generally, when a client comes to me, I'll ask them to send me their current program if they're on a program right now, or tell me what they've done in the past. Scheduling demands. We don't think about this. We think, I just have to squeeze fitness in and I have to do it a certain way because I have this goal. Well, we don't live in a vacuum. So we have to look at your full lifestyle. And I always ask clients, well, what's going on in your life? What is your work schedule? What is your sleep schedule? Are things the same day to day, or do they vary widely day to day or week to week? We need to look at the demands of your current schedule and how many days a week can you realistically train? That's usually one of my first questions. We have to look at stress level, because if you're highly stressed or in a stage of stress in your life where things are just going to be like this for a little while, you're probably going to need more rest days. And then we look at other activities, sports, and lifestyle. Beyond, like when a client comes to me and I'm programming for them and I'm writing their training programming for hypertrophy, bodybuilding, body composition changes, aesthetics, right? Usually that's what ladies are coming to me for. Let's make my body look a certain way. So we're focusing on resistance training. But I also want to know, what are your active hobbies? If you love to run or cycle or you take dance classes, there's something else I need to know about your level of activity the rest of the week. So if you're doing this for yourself, you need to look at, how many days a week can I realistically strength train, or am I strength training? How many days a week am I also doing other activities? And does that overlap with my strength training, or am I doing that on separate days? How active am I? What is my health status right now? Am I dealing with chronic issues? Am I in the middle of recovering from an illness or an injury? Or am I in optimal conditioning? So that's going to matter. All of that is going to matter. Here is my general recommendations. Absolutely, at least one full rest day a week. This is not active recovery. This is full. This is like, sit your butt down and chill out. And then you could do another 1 to 2 active recovery days, which we're going to get to in a minute, because that was another question about active recovery. For primarily strength training, when that's primarily your exercise of choice, like it is for me, I like to do 2 to 3 training days in a row and then take a rest day, and then another 2 or 3 and then a rest day. So I typically end up with about 5 days a week of strength training and 2 rest days. One of those rest days might be active recovery. But when I was in the midst of my prep and we were going hard and I was in a caloric deficit and I was training like my life depended on it, and I had cardio to do, those rest days were me sitting my ass on the couch, mandated by coach. So depending on, you also have to look at the intensity of your training. Are you in a caloric deficit or are you at maintenance? Things of that nature. And, which I'm probably going to say many times on this call, like I do on all of these, it's knowing yourself. So you've got to track your biofeedback. What is your body telling you? And not just, I feel like. Somebody used that, I'm going to call you out later. Here's a little tip just about language, because y'all follow me. I'm big on language. The words we use have power. When you say the words, I feel like, A story is behind that. You are about to tell a story. What is a story? It's basically another word for a lie. There is not necessarily truth or reality behind the next thing that's about to come out of your mouth. So start noticing when you say the words I feel like and how you're finishing that sentence, and then get a little curious about what's happening after that. So if you feel like you're not recovering well, what does that mean? Get very clear on what you mean by that. And anytime you say I feel like, get really clear. Well, what do I mean when I say I feel like? What's the facts? So you don't know facts if you're not tracking, right? My lovely friend from the low carb cruise gave me these little stones. This one says, what gets measured gets managed. And this was a popular saying when I was coaching with keto gains. What gets measured gets managed. So we need to find reality. We need to find the accuracy in our statements. So we need to find the accuracy in our journey. How well are you recovering is the first question. How do we know that? How is my sleep? How do I feel when I wake up in the morning? What is my energy level like? What is my mood like? What is my hunger, my satiety like? When I get sick, how quickly do I heal? Does it linger or do I get well quickly? How sore am I after a workout, either immediately or the DOMS a couple days later? How quickly can I get back to the gym? Am I feeling run down? All of these questions relate to recovery. So keep a little list. And I have a journal for those who found me through the Low Carb Living Summit. I gave that away for free. It's basically just a template of the same type of check-ins I do with my clients, and it's got biofeedback lists. It's important to know your biofeedback. Figure out for you what that is. Maybe, and there have been times lately I've been kind of under the weather. It keeps like coming back. It's very annoying. So my recovery has not been optimal lately. I've started out taking one day off every other day. Train a day, take a rest day. Train a day, take a rest day. And pure rest day, not like active recovery. And then I had to just take a week off to fully recover. Then I tried to hit it again. Nope. Took some more time off. So I do it very intuitively now with my training, regardless of what cycle I'm in. Even when I was on prep, if it was like I'm run down, my body's fighting something off, I can tell, take a rest day. So I don't like prescriptive things. I don't care if you bought a program and the program tells you to do XYZ. If your body is telling you no, you need to know when to take a rest day. If you've trained 3 days in a row, 4 days in a row, 5 days in a row, and you're tired and you're like, well, the training program says to do another day. I don't care. Take a rest day. I typically find that after 2 or 3 days is my general recommendation, take a day off. I don't like programs that do 5 days in a row, 6 days in a row. Unless, let's say, you're a beginner, you're more, or not necessarily even a beginner, it could be any level, but you have short workouts, they're not too taxing, maybe they're a full body program, or maybe you're doing a split. I've done this with clients before who had hectic schedules where it was no more than a 30-minute workout. We did 6 days a week. But the same thing, I would tell her, it's a split. You should be able to handle it the 6 days a week because it's going to be a different body part each day. You know, you just did legs, you're going to do arms the next day. You might do back the day after that, yada, yada. But one of the beauties of that, and I used to train like that as well. For a couple of years, I trained like that. The beauties of that is that you have 6 days a week, but you've got all these little splits where they're not extremely lengthy programs or training sessions. So you could always take a day off and then double them up and just cut back on the volume a little bit on the next two. Let's say you were feeling exhausted, you took a day off, and now you didn't do chest, and tomorrow you have triceps. Perfect. Do chest and triceps together and just take a set of each out so that you're not doing now double the work in one day. I'm not a big fan of doubling up workouts. I see that a lot with people with online programs. Oh, I didn't get to it, so I'm doubling up tomorrow. Careful with that, especially if it's more of a full body. Now you're doing 2 full body sessions, and and you're doubling up your time on one day, not ideal. Also, this goes for looking at your schedule in your week. If you have your most available days are 3 or 4 days in a row, when we get to programming, we'll talk through that a little bit more. But ideally, I like to have breaks in between a few days of training rather than just going ham for 4 days and then having 3 days rest. Okay, on to active recovery. The question was, on my rest days, can I do yoga? Well, that's going to depend. What kind of yoga are we talking about? First of all, if you have allotted one day of full rest, then yes, you can do active rest on the other 1 or 2 or 3 days, however many rest days you have in that week. Hatha yoga, restorative yoga, is practically meditation. I've fallen asleep in those sessions before. That kind of yoga is restorative. That kind of yoga is not going to be looked at as your body, from your body as exercise. The key with active recovery is doing activities that are not taxing on your body. They're not going to now create more damage that you now have to repair with more recovery. So if you're talking vinyasa, flow, hot yoga, or any of those yoga classes that are like exercise yoga classes, they're like adding in other stuff to make it an exercise class, I would not add that in. Unless, let's say let's say your split is 4 days of strength training, 2 days of more of a cardio focused activity, and then 1 full rest day. Then you could do yoga as one of your cardio focused activities. General rule of thumb for me is think about it the way your body would think about it. There are 2 ways of essentially moving our body. We have exercise activity and we have non-exercise activity. Your body is going to see different things differently. Let's say you're a hard training athlete. If you were to go for a 30-minute walk, you wouldn't even get your heart rate up at all. Your body wouldn't look at that as training at all. For somebody who's been sedentary for a long period of time, walking can be exercise. So it is going to depend on the person. But your heart rate is a good way to look at it. I certainly wouldn't do anything more than a nice rule of thumb, 180 minus your age for your heart rate. Take 180, subtract your age. You don't want to go above that. And if you've never checked your heart rate, that would be a good place to start. Test out your heart rate with different activities and make note of how high it gets with different things. It would be, I just saw the surprise, the surprised look on your face. Yeah, it's pretty awesome to become aware of those things. And the other really cool thing about tracking heart rate, and we'll talk about this when we do the cardio class next week in more depth, and we can talk about heart rate variability and things of that nature. But one of the coolest things, just like strength training, when you're new and you start to see how quickly you can gain strength, it's really exciting. The other really cool thing I'll never forget from one of my first years prepping and lifting consistently and doing cardio, because I never liked cardio, was after doing interval training consistently for a period of time, I could not believe how much higher I could go. And I was using a treadmill, so I could look at like miles per hour. It was like, oh my gosh, I remember huffing and puffing at 5 miles an hour, and now I'm going for 8, and it feels the same. Well, the reason it feels the same, if you check your heart rate, is after consistent training with cardio, you'll see that your heart rate doesn't get as high with the same type of movement. So that's a great indicator that you're moving in the right direction there and making improvements. Okay, so that would be a good thing. Start to pay attention to your heart rate. Is your body looking at it as exercise? And make note of different activities. So you have a little list of activities that are best for you for active recovery. All right, any questions so far? Follow-up questions before I get into programming? Okay, cool. All right, let's get into programming, fun stuff. All right, first and foremost, this is a quick, simple one. How often do you need to switch up your workout routine? Well, what's interesting is when we get down to progressive overload, I'm going to tell you all kinds of ways you can switch it up. So it kind of depends on what you mean by switch it up. But let's say, like, change your whole program. Like you're doing a program and then changing to a new program or a different program. I like to stick with a program for about 6 to 8 weeks. Typically, with my clients, depending on where they are and what their goals are and what we're working toward, it could be anywhere from 4 to 8 or even 12 weeks, sometimes even longer. If they're doing great and they're progressing with the program and we're hitting all the targets, they're improving their strength, they're improving the performance they want, and they're getting the body composition results, we may not change the program officially. I may just say, okay, let's extend it out a little bit longer. Or maybe they were on a program, they needed to take some time off. We come back to the same program, so it may extend out. But typically, rule of thumb, I generally stick with like, I will usually start with like a 6 to 8 weeks and then we'll reevaluate and look at progressing. And progressing can look a lot of different ways, which we'll get into in a minute. Now, also, I should mention that switching up your routine does not necessarily mean like going from one total type of training to a whole different thing, right? Because another thing I see a lot is women just jumping from one thing to another thing to another thing, right? I'm doing Tabata this week, and now found a CrossFit class, and now I'm going to try powerlifting, and now I'm going to do bodybuilding, and now so we're not talking like that. We're talking structured program for your goals. Hopefully, working with someone or getting something somewhere that can progress you through various phases. It might be a 4 week, 6 week, or 8 week phase, and then you go on to the next phase, but it's the same style of training. Give that a chance to work. And I'm always going to say resistance training is best for the goals we're talking about, at least in this group. We're talking about building muscle for longevity, health purposes, improving our health, and aesthetics. Okay. Equipment. Let's talk about First, let's talk about the equipment, then I'll get into the structuring and at-home workout routine. So, when you're working out at home, what are some equipment that I recommend beyond dumbbells, of course? And when we're talking about dumbbells or any other weights, I would say it's going to depend on how much you can lift for various body parts. If what you have at home is not challenging for you, you're going to want to go up in weight so that you have more resistance. And then when we get into progressive overload, I'll tell you about all the ways you can progress if you can't do that. So if you're like, I'm topped out at the weights I can get into my home, I can't go up in weights anymore. What else do I do? I'm going to have tons of ideas for you in a minute. But basic at home stuff that I think everybody should have, whether or not you're working out at a gym. Even if you are working out in a gym, these are great things to have for travel, for any time that you may not be able to get to the gym, or even to bring to the gym to enhance your workouts. And that is bands. All the bands, every different kind of band are all amazing. I love the loop bands. They're now called the booty bands. You see those all the time. They're smaller mini bands. Sometimes they're called mini bands, loop bands, booty bands, but put them around your knees, your ankles, your thighs. They're different thicknesses for the different resistance. Definitely when you're getting bands, I would get different resistance, because as you progress, you're going to need to increase the resistance of the bands. So that's number one for me. The mini bands, then also giant bands or monster bands. Those are the long, skinny ones. You'd be able to do like overhead presses with them under your feet. They're big, long loops, and they're skinny, and they're thick rubber. Then we have the bands with the handles. Those are great for pushing and pulling movements. Especially if you don't have like a lat pull down, you don't have cables, things that you don't have a pull-up bar. monster giant bands, mini bands. You can even do the flat bands. There's a lot you can do with flat bands as well, just the long, thin ones that don't have handles. So any and all of those kinds of bands are fantastic to have. I just mentioned, I didn't put it on my list, but I just mentioned a pull-up bar. I love that. I have a couple of them. You can put them in your doorways. Pull-up bars are great to have. If nothing else, if you're not in a place where you want to work on your pull-ups or your progressions, it's great for hanging. You can stretch out your vertebra. Really great for that. My dad uses that just to like hang from. It feels really good for him. Stability ball or a yoga ball or a, what else do they call those balls? A stability ball, the big balls like this. Those are amazing for so many things. I love them for hamstring curls, for instance, or glute bridges, enhancing the difficulty of those. So a lot of ab work you can do on those, a lot of core stability stuff you can do on a stability ball. You can use it as a bench and use it with weights for things like chest press. You can use it as a bench, you can lay across it and use it for back extensions and hyperextensions. And things of that nature. So lots you can do with a stability ball. TRX would be a great thing to have. Those are the long, not bands, straps. They look like straps and they have the little loops you put your feet in or you put your arms in, and you can do, getting the word, suspension. Thank you. Suspension movements with those. Lots and lots you can do with those. And then there is an equipment thread in the group. So if you're interested in more advanced home equipment like racks and bars and plates and things of that nature, let me know in the group, tag me, I will tag you where that thread lives. I created that thread so everybody could share their favorite brands, equipment that they use to build their home gym. I'm creating a document or a resource page on my website with all of those recommendations. So thank you to everybody who contributed to that. And I'll be working on that. So that's something else I'll have for you in the future. Also in the group, there is an Amazon recommended products page that I shared. And I put a lot of my favorites in there. Not only workout equipment, but supplements, books, and things like body weight scales, food scales, all the things you can think of. So that's in the group as well. But that's some great equipment stuff you can have for at home. And then how are you going to structure your training routine for at home with minimal equipment? Okay, so structuring a training program or routine is the same regardless of what you have access to. Some of the questions I mentioned that I asked clients earlier will apply to this as well. Decide how many days a week you can commit. Decide how much time you're going to have that you can devote on those days. There's your frame for how many days, right? You're going to take that first. Then you want to consider, what goals am I working toward? Do I have training? Do I have performance improvements I want to make? Do I want to get a full pull-up? Do I want to work on my push-ups? Is there a skill I want to improve? So when you're thinking about it like that, you would put movements in that help you train that skill. Barring that, let's just say general, you just want to change your body composition. You want to build muscle everywhere. You want to lose body fat, but particularly you want to build muscle everywhere. And maybe you don't have specific body parts you want to work on. If you have specific body parts you do want to work on, you're going to make sure that you prioritize those body parts. In the bikini world, that would be our shoulders and glutes. Those are going to get airtime. So if I'm training to get the physique of a bikini competitor, I would make sure I have a dedicated shoulder day and at least one dedicated glute day. But beyond that, you could say, okay, I just want to, in general, increase muscle mass everywhere. So I would look at, depending on your schedule, 3 to 5 days a week minimum 3 days a week, I would say strength training. If you did a 3-day split, 3 days a week, I would do a full body workout 3 days a week. That way you can hit every part of your body 3 times a week. Even if you only have 2 days a week, you could do a full body program 2 days a week. And once again, I would say split those days up so you have rest days in between. 3 days a week, split them up every other day so you have rest in between. If you're doing 4 days a week, you could do an upper day and then a lower focus day and then a rest day, another upper day, another lower day, another rest day. Upper lower split is one of my favorites. I do that with a lot of clients. And then another split. So these are all basically just you're splitting up your body in different ways. Upper lower is obvious, right? You're working your upper body or you're working your lower body. Push pull or push pull legs is another popular split where you're doing all your pushing movements on the same day. You're doing all your pulling movements on the same day, and then you're doing your legs on another day. Or like I said, you could do a full body where you're just doing a little bit of something for everything every day of your workout. So that's how you would start. You would start with how many days, how much time per day, what type of split do I want to do? Once you've decided on that, now you're just picking exercises, right? So let's say you're doing, well, if you're doing a full body split, matter of fact, a full body is a great way to do when you have very little equipment because a lot of the body weight movements you'd be doing where you don't need any equipment at all are going to work your full body. Planks is one of them. That's not just for core. It's going to work your core, but it'll also work your shoulders. It'll also work your arms. It's going to work your legs. So those kinds of static stability type movements are going to be great for full body. You can do a wonderful, well-structured training routine with nothing but your body weight. All right, I could deep dive on this, but that would probably need to be another class because we're almost already at an hour. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into what you can do. And then from there, you're just picking exercises. Okay. Now let's get into when you are training, all little components of training. So intensity. Oh, one of my clients, I love the way she speaks. Should your last rep say, damn, that was hard as fuck? So this question is about how do you know you're training with the right intensity? I always say go for muscle fatigue or muscle failure. I say this because most people will never actually reach mechanical failure. So there's all this out there in the space about whether failure training is good or bad or indifferent. People are changing their opinions all the time. But ultimately, majority of people are not going to go so hard that they're technically, mechanically failing, the muscle's failing and you can't even lift it again. So I always say aim for that because most people are going to fall short of that. And if you're trying to do the whole reps in reserve, like, okay, how many more reps before I hit failure? And let me stop 3 reps shy of that. First of all, that's really complex and complicated. And how are you going to know that for sure? So the way I always recommend doing it is just try to go as much as you can. So let's say, a lot of the time I like to do rep ranges that are 8 to 12 reps or 10 to 12, but typically I'll program clients between 6 and 12 reps. But a lot of the time with new clients, I will have them work between 8 and 12 reps on any given exercise. That means you're going to start with 8 reps at the heaviest weight that you can possibly do for 8 reps. And if you can get to 8 reps, go for 9. If you can get to 9 reps, go for 10. If you can get to 10 reps, go for 11. If you thought you could do 8 and you end up doing 12, guess what? That weight is too light for you. Now you got to go up in weight. If you see, and this is just a tip for anyone with any program you get, if it gives you a rep range, don't start at the top of the rep range, the highest reps. Start at the bottom of the rep range. So if you're given a rep range of 8 to 12, 3 sets of 8 to 12, go for the heaviest you can at the low end of that rep range and work your way up to the top end of that rep range. Once you're doing the top end, you got to start over again with a heavier weight and keep going. And that's always, we're about to get into progressive overload, but that's the basics that I tell people when you're starting to progressively overload in your workouts, which is what is going to get you all the gains. And this is how most people are not training when they say they're not getting the results they want, because they've been doing 3 sets of 10 with the same reps, the same weight every single time for years. You're not asking your body to do anything different. You're not asking it to build muscle because you just keep doing the same intensity. So yes, those last 2 to 3 reps should be difficult. I like to say, if you're not grunting, if you don't have an auditory response in the last couple of reps, you're probably not going hard enough. If you see me in the gym, you're going to hear me on the last few reps. Okay. And then the goal is you're still doing proper form, so your form hasn't broken down, and you're still going through the full range of motion of the movement. If you can only get half a rep out on that last bicep curl, that doesn't count. So count your reps at the rep before that. Or if you have to like sling it up to get it up there, that's your form is breaking down. So consider that. You want to go if you can go fully through the movement, full range of motion with good form, and and you try to do one more and you can't, that's where you're stopping with your reps. And that's proper intensity. That's what we mean by failure. That last one, you just can't get it out at all. Okay, so this is my favorite, progressive overload. Wouldn't it be great if we could just always and forever for the rest of our lives increase weight or reps every single time? We'd all eventually be pushing 1,000 pounds. Like, that's not realistic. You're not always able to push more weight or do one extra rep every single time. That's the goal. I always say strive for that. But you're going to have some weeks, some days where your strength is just not there. Doesn't mean that you're losing strength or you're losing gains, not unless it becomes a consistent thing. Now, if consistently week after week, you're regressing on what you're able to do, then you're probably not resting well enough. You're probably not recovering well enough. You may be overtraining. You may not be getting adequate nutrition. There's a lot of things you might have to look at there. But if it's one day or 1 week, you can attribute that to many things. We'll talk about cycles in a minute, and that can be a part of that. But you could be ill, you could be coming down with something. It could be something, you didn't sleep well the night before, you're under more stress. There's lots of things that can cause, from time to time, your strength to wax and wane. But in general, you want to be improving. So let's say, okay, you've been increasing reps, you've been increasing weight, maybe you've been doing the same program, and after 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you add more sets. You're just increasing your volume, and you're like, I can't do this forever because I'll be in the gym for 3 hours if I keep doing this, right? We have to look at other ways of progressively overloading our muscles. And basically, progressive overload just means we're asking our muscles to do more than they did last time. So the more we ask of them, now they have to break down more, and now they have to repair, and that's how they get bigger or stronger or both. All right, so here's some of the principles. Beyond adding weight, adding reps, adding sets, which is all going to add volume to your programming, my favorite way is tempo. Time under tension. Tempo meaning the way we're counting our reps. So slow, concentric, and or slow eccentric. Concentric is the contraction. Concentric would be contracting up on the bicep curl. Different exercises, depending on different exercises, they may be flip-flopped, but the contraction part of the movement is the concentric part of the movement. You could take 3 counts. You could take 4 counts to get up there instead of 1. If you're used to doing your bicep curls like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe now you're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're slowing it way down. And then my absolute favorite is the negatives, the eccentric part of the movement, slow on the way down. That is powerful for building strength and muscle. So slowing down the movements, either way or both ways, powerful, powerful. You're now increasing the time under tension, so you're asking the muscle to do more. Another great way is static holds. When we talk about planks, that's a good example of that. Anything you have to hold. Hollow hold is another good core stability exercise as well. It's where you're laying on your back, but you're hollowing out and you're holding your arms and your legs up. Anything that's asking you to hold something in a static position is a great way to increase. It's also increasing time under tension and load on that muscle. Unilateral work. If you've been doing a lot of barbell work or you've been doing a lot of dumbbell work, but it's you're doing hammer curls with both arms, you can hold the dumbbell in one arm, static. So now you have a static hold on your left arm while you're doing hammer curls with your right arm. And then you swap. You can do alternating, or you could just do all on one side while you static hold with the other and all on the other side. And any other unilateral work, one of my favorites is Romanian deadlifts or dumbbell deadlifts. Unilateral, so one leg, single leg deadlift. Anytime you're working one side of the body, it's going to put more of an emphasis or a isolation on that muscle group on that side of the body. So this is also a really great way to correct imbalances. If you notice that one side is stronger than the other, you can do more reps with one side than the other. Rather than trying to add more reps to the weaker side, do unilateral training, but start with the weaker side first. So if your left side is weaker because you're right-handed, do unilateral training, but start with your left hand first, or your left side, upper, lower, whatever it may be. But unilateral work is fantastic. Other ways to increase the isolation of a muscle, there are going to be progressions for difficulty or isolation. So for instance, shoulders. It's a great example for like a shoulder raise. Lateral raises or front raises for your shoulders. Lateral raises being these dumbbell lateral raises or dumbbell front raises. If you're just standing, if you've always stood to do those, doing them seated will now increase the isolation. You're now not asking for the same level of core stability as when you're standing. So you're supporting yourself with the bench or whatever you're sitting on. You're going to notice it feels more difficult because now you're only recruiting these muscles rather than your full body kicking in to stabilize you. To take that up another notch, you can support your body even more. So for instance, you could take a incline bench, and now you're going to be leaning back on the incline bench, and now you do your front raise. Y'all, the way I had to drop the weight. That's how you'll know. When you change it up and you realize, I got to pick up lighter dumbbells, you are isolating that muscle even more. Shoulders are such a great example because when you're doing rear delt flies, for example, and you're just standing doing rear delt flies versus sitting versus leaning all of your body weight on that incline bench, you're going to feel all the difference in that muscle. Let's see. Now this works in reverse as well. To increase your core stability and your balance, so standing on an unbalanced surface is now going to recruit more of your core muscles. So a balance board or a Bosu ball or things like that you can do any of your other training, any of your other exercises on an unstable surface, and it will require and recruit more of your core to engage for those. So it's another way of core training. I guess you could add that to the core training section. Oh, cool. Now I'm seeing the comments in the Facebook group. Cool. Cool. Ooh, we have a TRX lover. Yeah, Sarah says she loves failing in the gym because I love trying my hardest. And we have another question: how to build a booty without deadlifts? Why would you not want deadlifts? They're my favorite thing in the world. Okay, let's see. A few more of these on progressive overload. Increase your range of motion. So, couple of great examples for this, since we just talked about deadlifts. Deficit deadlifts are one of my favorite things. You're standing on plates or benches or risers of some sort. So now when you go down into the stretch portion where you're stretching your hamstrings more, you're increasing the range of motion of the movement. You're going down farther than you would have if you didn't have the deficit. So rather than maybe stopping here, you're up on a riser, you have to go down lower. You have to now engage more to keep all of this solid, but you're stretching the back of those hamstrings more. You're requiring the hamstrings to engage more. That's really great for those of my ladies who are very flexible, because you may find you're doing your deadlifts, you're going down to the ground, and you're not feeling the hamstrings engaged. Now, there's a couple of other ways you may have to correct that. But as a dancer, I can say that was always a thing for me. So once I discovered deficit deadlifts, it was amazing. Similar thing happens with, and this is similar to what I just shared with shoulders, because you're getting some support, but incline bicep curls. So you're now on an incline bench, you're leaning back, and your arm is straight down. So your range of motion is all the way out. You're starting kind of from a dead stop, right? We call them dead lifts because it's like the same kind of thing. You're starting from dead, and now you got to pull it up. A lot of the time, no matter how hard you try, your triceps may kick in, your shoulders may kick in for bicep curls. When you're taking all that out with the incline, you're going to feel it's so much more isolated in your bicep. So anything you can do to increase that range of motion is going to also improve or require your muscles to do more. And then we have muscle fatigue. So we talked about mechanical fatigue of, lifting heavy and going, doing as many reps as you can. But what are other ways we can increase that muscle fatigue without adding more weight or reps? Burnout sets. Well, burnout sets are more reps. But this is not what you're going to do for every single working set. But at the end of your whole workout, you're at the end, you could do some burnout sets, meaning like 20, 25, 30 reps of a particular exercise. I had a trainer who loved to do this. I did my 3 or 4 sets of leg extensions, and then it would be like 25 reps. Talk about a burner. Drop sets is another kind of, these are kind of more advanced techniques. Drop sets. So you're doing your 10 reps, you do 10 reps, then you drop to another weight, a lower weight, you do as many as you can with that lower weight, maybe you get to 6, you drop to another lower weight, do as many as you can. So you continue the set out. You wouldn't be able to continue that set, you wouldn't be able to do any more reps at that weight. But you drop to a lower weight, now you can do some more. Drop it to a lower weight, and now you can do some more. You see that a lot with advanced athletes. Supersets. And this is another technique I like to use also when I don't have a whole lot of time to train. I can look at my program and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to do these 2 exercises together in a set. So instead of doing one exercise, resting, doing another set, resting, doing another set, resting, and then moving on to the next exercise, you can pair up 2 exercises in a superset, and you don't take a rest in between them. You can do this with opposing muscle groups, or you can do this with complementary muscle groups. Or you could do this with the same muscle group. If you really want to get that fatigue, you could do 2 bicep curl exercises, 2 different ones, pair them up and do them as supersets. Now you're going to get more muscle fatigue and activation. Giant sets is another example of this. Giant sets is it's 3 exercises that you're now doing in like a tri-set or a giant set, back to back to back. And then you start again, you do back to back to back. My current trainer loves giant sets. Yes, Giovanna, the 777 dumbbell 21s is a popular bicep workout where you are working 3 different parts of the range of motion. So you do 7 bicep curls where you're just going halfway to 90 degrees. Then from 90 degrees up to the top of the movement, you're doing 7. And then you drop it all the way down and you do 7 full range of motion. So it's just changing the range of motion to get more reps out. Quarter reps or pulses is another example of this. You can do a full rep and then a quarter rep. So you're just doing the very end of that motion, the very top of that rep, top of that exercise. So let's say let's just do it on bicep curls. I see this a lot with leg extensions, for example. But it would be a full range of motion and then quarter rep. Full range of motion, quarter rep. Full range of motion, quarter rep. It's just all these different ways of getting more tension on that muscle. Another place I like to do like pulses would be certain squat exercise. Let's say you're doing a goblet squat. You can do pulses at the top or at the bottom of the movement. That looks like it's working. Yeah. Like another quarter rep kind of a thing. And then we have frequency of training a muscle group. This is another great way to create more progressive overload. Change your split. Let's say you've been doing the same split for a long time and you want to build up your shoulders more. So you change your split and now you're training shoulders 2 or 3 times a week because you're pairing it with different muscle groups and you're doing a little bit of a different split. But now the frequency of training that muscle group has increased. Let's say you were doing an upper lower split, and now you want to switch to a full body split 4 days a week. Now you're going to be training all of your muscle groups 4 times instead of probably if you were doing upper lower, you were doing 2 times a week with each muscle group before. So increasing frequency. You can totally change your training style for a little while. You can shift to a powerlifting or a power building style, where now you're looking at speed and velocity rather than just muscle hypertrophy type of training. So you can shift it. Focus on strength rep ranges and then go back to hypertrophy. Strength rep ranges being 5 reps or less. You can change your equipment. This is something that my programs this past year for this past prep with my coach have been, I think I was on the same program for like 12 weeks and then we switched it up, maybe once or twice, not that frequently. But I train out of a commercial gym and I can't always get the same equipment. So even though I had the same program, I would by default switch up training equipment. You're going to get a different type of stimulus from barbells than you will from dumbbells, than you will from cables, than you will from bands, than you will from body weights, kettlebells, landmine. There's so many different machines. They're all going to hit the angle of the muscle a little differently, the way that the body mechanics are working with it. Like I said earlier, they're doing unilateral movements rather than always doing both muscles on both sides of the body at the same time. So switching up your equipment is another great way to continue progressing, asking a little bit more or different out of your body. All right, so that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different ways that you can continue to progressively overload beyond weights and reps. Sarah asks how to practice deadlifts at home without equipment because I miss them so much. You don't need equipment for deadlifts. You can do body weight deadlifts. You can do soup can deadlifts if you don't have dumbbells. You can do banded deadlifts. And like I said, one of my favorites is single leg deadlifts or staggered stance like deadlifts. So you're working unilaterally. Yeah, you're never limited by equipment. Anything you can do with equipment, you can do without equipment. And Jessica says she can't do deadlifts because she has a back injury. So how to build, I think you were asking how to build glutes. I can't get back to that comment. Glutes without deadlifts. Deadlifts, I wouldn't say are necessarily the best for glutes. They're fantastic for hamstrings for sure. You can get some glute activation as well, but there's going to be a lot of other exercises that I would recommend for glutes before I would recommend deadlifts. Particularly hip thrusts or glute bridges or any variation of those absolutely should be in anybody's glute program. Adductions, abductions with a machine, with bands, with cables, any of that. Glute kickbacks, you could do pull throughs with cables or bands. You can do, so any of those hinging movements, which any of those hinging movements I just mentioned are actually better for the glutes than deadlifts. Oh my gosh, hyperextensions, reverse hyperextensions, fantastic for glutes. I just talked about a bunch of these on one of the recent master classes. Squats to an extent, Bulgarian split squats and lunges, all different types are going to be amazing for glutes. A lot of the ladies in the group right now are reading this stuff right here. Glute Lab by Brett Contreras, the glute guy. We might as well do a book club because after I mentioned it and a couple of the ladies mentioned, now everybody, there's a big group of us, I think, in the group right now that are reading it. But he talks about hinging movements, adduction movements and abduction movements, and forgetting what the third one was, but 3 planes of movement you want to move to work all the different parts of your glutes. What else do I like a lot for glutes? I love goblet squats. Oh, so many things. I'm just thinking about the programming. I was just doing them. I always geek out on, oh, hamstring curls. Although if you're dealing with, well, yeah, hamstring curls are going to be much better. Isolation for hamstrings and glutes than deadlifts. Okay, let's see. All right, we're almost done. I'm not going to keep us too much longer because I'm way over. But proper warm-up and stretching to prevent injury. I'm going to give you the Cliff's Notes version of this. Key thing to know is you don't want to do static stretches when you're cold. So before a workout, you do not want to be doing like the holding at the top of your range of motion. You don't want to be doing anything static. You want to do dynamic stretching before exercise. Preferably, I always say get warm first with some type of cardio activity. I usually for my clients, I'll say do 3 to 5 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes, depending on time of year. Sometimes in the winter, it takes a little bit longer to just get your body warm. Some kind of aerobic activity, some kind of cardio activity, anything of your choice. You can run in place, high knees. Nobody likes burpees. I would never recommend burpees, but treadmill, elliptical, any kind of cardio equipment or something that's going to get your heart rate up a little bit, get your body warm before you do anything else. Then I would do a dynamic stretch, which would be like mobility exercises. This is a good thing you can Google or look up on YouTube. Mobility. So these are going to be moving, dynamically moving stretches, not static. And depending on your sport, in her case, she was talking about getting shin splints or ankle splints if she doesn't stretch before a race. So that's like for running, right? So if we're talking about bodybuilding, you might want to grab some bands and do some band pull aparts for your shoulders, for your upper body, things like that, depending on the particular body part that you are training that day. If we're talking strength training and you're working with heavy weights, you want to work up to your working sets. So you want to start with some warm-up sets, meaning lower the weight, increase the reps, get those particular muscles warm for that particular movement that you're getting ready to do. You can do, if you're getting ready to do squats, do some body weight squats before you pick up the barbell. If you're doing barbell, start with just the barbell before you put any weight on it, that kind of thing. Work your way up to your working sets. I'm going to skip past the hormones and training because that really does need its own deep dive. There are books. There's a book. Funny you should ask, because this woman just wrote a new book that I just picked up on Audible. I was like, I don't have it here. I have it on Audible. But her first book was called Roar, and it was all about training with your cycle for athletes. She was an endurance athlete, but also a PhD, and that's what she did her PhD on. She's not a proponent of low carb diets, so I never finished the book because I think it was just hard for me to get past that part. Tends to be a lot of the time when I go to these mainstream things. But I've recently been reintroduced to her when she was on Gabrielle Lyon's video YouTube channel. And she had her new book come out about menopause. So now I'm listening to that, giving that a listen. I'll probably reread this. But a lot of the literature that you see about training for your cycle, here's the quick and dirty. Follicular phase versus luteal phase. Follicular phase is from the start of your cycle, which is your period, from your bleed up to ovulation. Luteal phase is after ovulation until you get your bleed again. So first half of the cycle is follicular. This is when you're meant to be, or what they say, you're going to be your strongest. So through your bleed, through the week after your bleed up to ovulation is your stronger time of the month, when you can push heavier, go harder, all of that. The luteal phase, the second half, is when you're going to be weaker, so to speak, need to do less fasting. Your body's more sensitive. Think about it like this. That's your premenstrual time. So that's typically when you experience all those symptoms, usually premenstrual. Some people experience it during their period. But the bigger thing, and this is what I always say when we talk about anything like this, is everybody's different. And the last thing we should ever do is say, this is what some expert said, so I'm relegated to this. I'm going to be weaker the second 2 weeks of my period, so I might as well not try. I should just go do yoga that week. And you see so many books talking about don't do anything strenuous. There are ways, and menopause is a big one too. And I just also got Dr. Mindy Pell's Fast Like a Girl, which I'm very interested to read because I'm not a big proponent of fasting in the first place. But I know she's talking about that in here. But the thing is, we can get these things in our head and we can let them limit us. And the more important thing is, where am I at? What am I capable of at this moment? And then let me make notes about it, and then I can compare. So if I'm frustrated and I feel like I'm taking a step back because I feel so weak this week, but then I've been making notes and I've been tracking my biofeedback, and I notice, oh, look at that. Last month at the same time, I was weak. But then I got really strong, and now I feel weak again. Oh, interesting. When is my cycle due? Oh, it's due in a few days. Oh, that makes a lot of sense now. As opposed to looking at that and saying, well, I'm not going to be strong that week, so I'm not going to try. So we still need to be the owners of our journey, the CEOs of our body. So with any research or knowledge that we learn and we gain, we always need to look at it with our own context and always, always say, this doesn't limit me. I'm the only one that limits me. That being said, let's see. Protein powder for training. Okay. All right, here's the key with protein in particular. It does not matter when you get the protein in. The whole anabolic window thing is a myth. It's bro science. You don't have to get a bolus of protein within a certain amount of time after your workout. As long as you are nailing your protein needs, getting adequate protein in your day for your goals in a full 24-hour period, it doesn't matter when it happens. Now, like I always say, I highly recommend against OMAD. And there is research that says getting protein in separate boluses 3 times a day is going to be more ideal. I like to say 2 to 3 meals a day on keto. 2 to 3 meals a day is fantastic. I would not do OMAD. I would not do extended fasting. I would not train fasted unless you're training really early in the morning. You can't eat that early, yada, yada. But if you're fitting, I mean, most of us have to fit, we all have to fit our training in between meals and throughout our day. So you're going to be eating at some point. I say use your body as your guide. If you're starving, that's not ideal. If you're stuffed because you just ate, that's not ideal. Have a meal, a couple hours later, go train. If you don't eat again for a couple hours, that's fine too. Unless you're starving and it makes you binge because you're trying to wait for that meal. But protein shakes, and this is the other thing, protein shakes are completely unnecessary. I've talked about this on supplements masterclasses and other Q&As. We do not need protein powder. And in my personal recent experience, doing lion diet, coming back to carnivore, putting in the protein powders again, they are not doing my body any service. It is a highly processed, packaged food. If you're choosing a clean protein powder, it's not the same as like going and buying a candy bar or a junky protein bar and stuff like that. But it's still highly processed, packaged, not what our body intended, not what our body's expecting. It's not real food. So supplement with those if you must, but ideally get all of your protein needs from whole food. Okay, let's see. Body composition. How do I build muscle on keto? Okay, this is actually really key. So, and then there was another one I was going to answer along the same lines. Or maybe I did in the group. I think I did in the group. This lady shares she's lost 8 to 10 pounds, don't want to lose my gains, but want to build a bigger booty. Okay. Building muscle on keto is the same as building muscle on any other diet. You need an adequate muscle building stimulus, meaning a good training program, which is everything we were just talking about here. If you're doing progressive overload, if you're asking your muscles to do more, that's how you're getting that. Number 2, you need adequate protein. You need to make sure you're eating adequate protein. If you're in a deficit because you're losing body fat, you want to make sure you're eating enough protein, even in a deficit, that you can try to, now you're getting the stimulus from the training and the response from putting the nutrients in that your body needs to build the muscle. Third, adequate recovery. So you're getting that full rest day. If you're doing your active recovery, you still have a full rest day, you're sleeping well, you're managing your recovery. Those 3 things are key. The other things, the 4th kind of thing is the energy piece. If you're in so deep of a deficit, you're not eating enough fat to sustain your body's needs, that could also impact your gains because you're not going to be able to push in the gym the way you need to. So if you're in an extreme deficit and you're losing body fat super rapidly, it's going to be a lot more difficult to build muscle in that state. And then the secondary question to that was how to eat in a surplus to build while doing keto. You don't have to be in a surplus to build muscle. This is a common misconception in the fitness space. If you're in maintenance or a slight deficit, you can still build muscle. Even in a deeper deficit, you can still build muscle, but it would be harder because you once again, you want the adequate stimulus, adequate energy, adequate recovery. So if you're too deep in a deficit, it's going to be more difficult. But so you don't actually have to eat in a surplus. But if you're, let's say, coming up to maintenance or going into a slight surplus because you do want to focus on building, the question was, do you increase fat or protein? If you're already maxing out your protein, you're eating adequate protein, eating more protein isn't necessarily, there's going to be diminishing returns at some point. So depending on where your protein is, if you have to figure out if you've been eating enough or not. I have a protein masterclass. Check that out to see. But once you've got that adequate protein, fat would be the lever. So bring your fat up. And if you notice, you're putting on weight very quickly. That's not muscle. You don't build, I always say, you don't build muscle that quickly. You don't build muscle as quickly as you lose body fat or gain body fat. Body fat can be lost and gained weekly, 1 to 2 pounds a week. Muscle is going to be like, you're lucky if you gain 1 pound a month, even as a newbie. So if you're gaining really quickly, know that that is not muscle. And if that's happening, you increased your fat too much and you got to bring it back down and find that sweet spot. And then her other question was, do you cycle carbs if trying to grow muscle? You don't have to, and you certainly don't need it. I just did a carbs, I didn't call it a carbs masterclass, but I do have a carbs and fats masterclass. And the masterclass I just did was about when you do want to bring carbs back in. And we did talk about carb cycling there. So check that out if you want to know more on that. But you absolutely do not need carbs to build muscle. The other question here was, what does maintenance look like? That is a big, big question. And I have a maintenance masterclass, so definitely check that out. I went deep on that there. And maintenance is going to look different for different people. I don't know if you mean for training, like what does maintenance training look like? Maintenance macros, maintenance, if you're still on, share a little more what you want to know. But maintenance, building, maintenance, and fat loss training does not have to look different at all. The goal is always the same with training, progressive overload. So your training doesn't have to change. When you see everybody out there talking about a fat loss training programs are not for fat loss. Training programs are for muscle building, changing body composition. There are not exercises that burn fat better than others. Fat burning or fat loss is going to come from nutrition. And cardio, speaking of, that's the next question. Since I am so far over and I already said next week's class is going to be on cardio, I will leave all the cardio questions for next week, and I'll make sure to dive deep into that topic next week. So join me next week for cardio class, and let's see if we have any other questions tonight. Thank you everyone for hanging around, especially if you hung around the whole time, because this was a long one. I like this format for training, so I'll probably do another one of these next month, and we'll just keep on rolling with all the new questions, all the questions you have about training. Yep. As usual, you can always drop your questions or your requests for future topics in the group, and I'll be happy to add them to the list. Thank you so much for being here, and happy Monday. Go have a happy Valentine's Day. Wish me a happy 40th birthday, which is happening on Wednesday. And I will see y'all next Monday. Good night.